I was called dead weight in front of 42 people, and it happened with the casual cruelty of someone who had never been told no. No warning, no calendar invite, no closed door. Just a Tuesday operations review with stale lemon coffee, flickering fluorescent lights, and my quarterly performance deck projected behind me, like evidence in a trial I did not know I was standing in. Evan Hale leaned back in his chair, arms folded, expensive sneakers propped against the conference table leg. He did not look at the slide. He looked at me. "I do not understand why we keep legacy staff around," he said, loud enough to land in every corner of the room. "It is like dragging dead weight into a future that needs to move fast." Silence fell hard. No coughs, no shuffling. Just the soft whine of the ventilation system and the sound of my career combusting in real time. I was the director of distribution strategy at Northfall Industries. I had built our logistics network from 0 warehouses to a continent-wide operation. 12 years, 3 supply chain collapses, 1 emergency acquisition I negotiated during a global shutdown while my mother was dying in a hospital 3 states away. Evan Hale knew none of that. Or worse, knew and did not care. He was the CEO's son, officially titled Transformation Advisor, unofficially untouchable. He had arrived 6 months earlier with a smile sharpened by privilege and a resume that read like it had been assembled by an assistant who hated him. He sipped from a green smoothie and shrugged. "No offense, Dana. You just feel replaceable." Replaceable. I closed the presentation, did not argue, did not react. I nodded once to my team, gathered my tablet, and walked out before my face betrayed me. I locked myself in the restroom 2 floors down, sat on the edge of the sink, and stared at the cracked mirror until my breathing slowed. I counted the cracks. 12. 1 for every year I gave them. This was not a performance critique. It was positioning. Evan was clearing space, and people like him did not announce intent unless the paperwork was already drafted. When I returned to my desk, a yellow note waited on my keyboard. "Evan wants to see you at 4 p.m. I texted my husband. "It is happening." He replied a moment later. "Wine or gasoline?" At 4 sharp, I stepped into the glass conference room. Evan sat at the head of the table. 2 human resources representatives flanked him like witnesses to an execution. "Dana," he said warmly, "let us be practical. You have been valuable. A solid archive." Archive, past tense. He slid a folder toward me. Thick, polished, too generous to be innocent. "We are pivoting," he continued. "Leaner, faster. This is a chance for reinvention." The severance was substantial. 6 months' salary, full bonus, equity untouched, insurance. He wanted me gone and quiet. I signed without hesitation, shook his hand, even smiled. I left the building like I was headed to lunch. Then I went home, poured a glass of aged red wine, and opened the second folder I had hidden in my closet for half a year. Project Meridian. Evan thought he had removed dead weight. What he had actually done was cut the last thread holding his future together. By Tuesday morning, the rumor mill had already finished its first full revolution. I could feel it in the way conversations stopped when I passed, in the sudden politeness of emails that used to be blunt, in the way my calendar filled with meetings I was no longer invited to, but still somehow expected to prepare for. Bradley had not fired me yet, but he had begun the corporate equivalent of salting the earth. At 9:12 a.m., procurement requested an emergency vendor review. At 9:27, finance asked for a revised fulfillment forecast using assumptions I had not approved. At 9:41, an anonymous complaint appeared in HR systems citing concerns about my resistance to innovation. The handwriting was obvious even without a signature. Bradley did not understand logistics, but he understood pressure. I ignored all of it. Instead, I opened a secure spreadsheet labeled nothing more than Q4 contingencies and began updating numbers that only mattered if the company lost its footing. Alternate carriers, secondary ports, contractual escape clauses hidden 3 layers deep in supplier agreements that only I had negotiated personally. I had never needed them before. Now they were insurance. At 11:03 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Katrina Whitmore. I stared at the name longer than I should have. Katrina was a ghost story people whispered during conferences, a cautionary tale wrapped in silk. She had been the brain behind the Whitmore brand long before Bradley learned how to tie a tie. Then one year she vanished, leaving behind a settlement, a silence, and a son who thought power was genetic. I did not answer. At 11:06, another text arrived. You already moved faster than he expected. That tells me you are paying attention. That confirmed it. She was watching. At lunch, Bradley made his next move. He called an all-directors sync, the kind that looked collaborative on paper but existed solely to establish dominance. He arrived late on purpose, smoothie in hand again, this time mango. He leaned against the table instead of sitting, casual in a way that demanded attention. We are entering a recalibration phase, he said, voice loud, confident. That means legacy assumptions need to be challenged, especially in fulfillment, especially where we have been overpaying for comfort. Overpaying was his word for stability. He clicked a slide onto the screen. Vendor consolidation, aggressive renegotiation, volume leverage. The room murmured approval because no one wanted to be the dissenting voice. I raised my hand. Bradley smiled, indulgent. Yes, Sarah. These contracts are not interchangeable, I said calmly. Moga handles 40% of our high-margin lanes. They prioritize us because of relationship equity, not pricing alone. If you squeeze them without alternatives live, you risk service collapse within weeks. He laughed. Soft. Public. This is what I mean, he said, gesturing to the room. Fear-based leadership. We are not married to suppliers. They work for us. No, I replied. They work with us, and they have options. Bradley leaned forward. So do we. The meeting ended without resolution, which meant I had been marked. By mid-afternoon, my access to 2 internal dashboards was revoked under the excuse of role realignment. That was not strategy. That was panic. At 4:48 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Dinner. Tonight was not a suggestion. Belly 7 sharp. I almost declined. Almost. But there was a difference between fear and timing, and I needed to understand whose board I had stepped onto. Belly was quiet in the way powerful places always were. No menus on the table, no prices visible. Katrina sat already, posture relaxed, eyes sharp. You should have let him fire you, she said without greeting. It would have been cleaner. I sat. Ordered water. Clean is overrated, I replied. What do you want? She smiled. The kind that never reached her eyes. To finish what he started before he realizes you are not dead weight. You are leverage. And just like that, the war shifted from survival to inevitability. The fallout did not arrive loudly. There was no screaming email blast or dramatic all-hands meeting. Instead, it crept in through systems and schedules, the way real damage always does. Quietly, precisely, ruthlessly. By Wednesday morning, Whitmore Corporation logistics dashboards were bleeding red. Missed delivery windows, unexplained delays, rising carrier penalties. Bradley had assumed supply chains were plug-and-play. He believed vendors were interchangeable, and loyalty was a myth invented by middle managers who lacked ambition. What he failed to understand was that supply chains were built on memory, on favors, on people who knew which warehouse manager answered calls after midnight and which port authority stamped paperwork faster if you asked nicely and brought donuts. Those people answered my calls now. At Moga headquarters, the mood was almost cheerful, not celebratory, focused. There is a difference between gloating and competence. One burns hot and fast. the other indoors. I stood at the glass wall overlooking the operations floor, watching teams reroute freight with practiced calm. Screens flickered with updated schedules. Algorithms adjusted volumes automatically. Every improvement we made widened the gap between us and Whitmore Corporation. At 10:12 a.m., my assistant flagged an incoming message marked urgent. Bradley Whitmore requested a meeting. I laughed once, quietly, then shook my head. He did not get meetings anymore. He got consequences. Instead of replying, I forwarded the request to legal with a single note. Route all communication through counsel. That was when the second strike landed. Whitmore Corporation announced an internal restructuring, a classic move. When leadership panics, they rename chaos and hope investors applaud the confidence. Bradley framed it as modernization, streamlining, cultural reset. Translation: blame the dead weight. 3 department heads were dismissed before lunch. None of them were responsible for logistics failures. All of them had opposed Bradley during early planning sessions. Fear spread fast. Slack channels went silent. Cameras went dark in virtual meetings. Fear is a solvent. It dissolves loyalty quickly. By Thursday afternoon, Katrina Whitmore called again. This time I answered. "You are doing well," she said. No greeting, no warmth. "I am doing my job," I replied. She chuckled softly. "You always were better at execution than theatrics." Bradley never learned that. He thought power was volume. "Why are you really helping me?" I asked. A pause. Longer this time. "Because men like him believe inheritance equals destiny," Katrina said. "And I wanted him to learn that nothing is permanent, not even bloodlines." "You are using me," I said. "Yes," she replied calmly. "And you are using me back. That is how alliances work." I did not argue. She was not wrong. But awareness is its own leverage. That night, I finalized a deal Bradley did not know existed. A regional freight partnership, Whitmore Corporation, relied on quietly switched preferred vendors. No announcement, no warning, just a new logo on invoices and a polite email citing service optimization. By Friday morning, Whitmore missed payroll processing windows for 2 overseas facilities. That triggered the board. At 3:48 p.m., I received an encrypted message from a board member I had once trained during a crisis simulation years ago. "What do you want, Sarah?" I stared at the screen for a long moment. "Stability," I typed. "Accountability. And for him to never hold unchecked authority again." The reply came minutes later. "Then do not stop." I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, finally allowing myself one honest breath. This was no longer about revenge. It was about architecture, about dismantling a flawed structure so something functional could exist in its place. Bradley thought he was fighting a disgruntled former employee. He was wrong. He was fighting the system he never bothered to understand. And systems do not get angry. They simply outgrow you. The injunction did not land quietly. It detonated like a flashbang inside every department connected to Whitmore Corporation. Meetings were canceled. Calendars were wiped. Legal holds spread through inboxes like a contagion. Bradley had wanted delay. What he got was exposure. By Tuesday morning, 3 board members had retained independent counsel. By noon, compliance officers were camped on 2 floors with rolling carts and external hard drives. By evening, the stock price had dipped just enough to trigger automated alerts that pulled in outside analysts who smelled blood. I did not celebrate. I built. Moga headquarters became a hive of controlled urgency. No panic, no shouting, just execution. We finalized rerouting contracts. We locked exclusivity clauses. We accelerated automation that Whitmore had delayed for years because it required actual operational literacy. By Wednesday, 47% of Whitmore freight volume was flowing through alternate channels they no longer controlled. Bradley noticed when his dashboard turned gray. He called me at 9:14 p.m. from a blocked number. I answered. You think you are clever, Sarah, he said. His voice was brittle, rehearsed. You think you won. I think you underestimated how many people were waiting for you to fail, I replied. He laughed, sharp and desperate. You are nothing without my company. You are a vendor with delusions. I looked at the live feed on my tablet. Another client signature completed. Another routing hub activated. Bradley, I said evenly, you taught me something valuable. Titles do not create leverage. Dependencies do. Silence. Then his voice dropped. You made this personal. You made it public, I corrected. He hung up. The next morning, the board convened without him. His calendar was cleared under the guise of strategic review. His access badge failed at the elevator. Security escorted him to a conference room with glass walls and no windows. By afternoon, the resignation draft existed. He did not write it. His father did. Robert Whitmore called me at 6:02 p.m. His voice was older than it had been the week before. You have placed us in an impossible position, he said. I considered that. No, Robert. I gave you clarity. Your son placed you here. A pause. Then a quiet admission. He did not listen. No, he did not. What do you want? He asked. I had rehearsed this moment. Not for greed, for closure. I want Whitmore Corporation to publicly dissolve all logistics integration plans. I want a signed affidavit confirming MOGA independence. I want your son removed from all operational authority, permanently. And you, Robert asked carefully, I want no further contact. The call ended without argument. The statement hit the press 48 hours later, carefully worded, bloodless. Bradley Whitmore had stepped down to pursue new ventures. The board reaffirmed its commitment to ethical leadership and operational transparency. Internally, the truth moved faster. Staff leaked emails, finance spreadsheets surfaced, screenshots of Bradley approval chains circulated. Every mistake he had buried under confidence now stood naked under fluorescent light. Whitmore Corporation survived. Bradley did not. 3 days later, Katrina vanished. Her number disconnected. Her shell trusts dissolved. Her advisory roles resigned without comment. Even the firm that handled her settlements reported a closed file. She left behind only one thing: control. MOGA Holdings filings updated overnight. 63% ownership consolidated under my name. No CEO chairs, no silent partners. Just me. I stood alone in my office after midnight, lights off, city humming below. The victory felt heavy, not triumphant, earned. I opened my laptop and drafted a single internal memo. No nepotism, no legacy authority, no silent deals, only performance. Then I hit send. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, the empire began to breathe. And for the first time since that whiteboard humiliation, I slept without ghosts. 3 months after Bradley Whitmore vanished from every executive directory that once worshipped his name, the noise finally stopped. No lawsuits, no emergency board calls, no anonymous leaks to the press. Silence is what comes after a storm when everything fragile has already been ripped away. MOGA Holdings had stabilized into something dangerous to the old order. Not loud, not flashy, efficient, profitable, predictable. The kind of company investors trust because nothing interesting ever happens. Which is exactly what terrifies executives who survive on chaos. I sat alone in the executive conference room at MOGA headquarters early Monday morning, reviewing freight projections on a wall-sized display. No entourage, no assistants hovering with tablets, just me, a cup of coffee, and numbers that finally made sense. The door opened quietly. Vince Caldwell stepped in, hands in his pockets, wearing the same wrinkled Henley he had worn the day I bought his company. He looked around like a man still surprised the building belonged to him again. Board is assembled, he said. They are waiting on you. I nodded and closed the file. Let them wait 1 more minute. He smirked. Still ruthless. Only efficient, I corrected. When I entered the boardroom, every conversation stopped. 12 people, some legacy logistics veterans, some new capital blood, all watching to see what kind of leader emerges after a war ends. I did not sit at the head of the table. I stood. 3 months ago, I began. This company was a contingency plan, a shield, a response to arrogance. Today, it is something else. I let the words settle. Whitmore Corporation believed supply chains were leverage tools, weapons to threaten margins and squeeze loyalty. That mindset destroyed them. Several heads nodded. At Moga, logistics is infrastructure. You do not weaponize infrastructure. You reinforce it so nothing collapses when pressure comes. I clicked the remote. A map filled the screen. Shipping lanes rerouted. Bottlenecks dissolved. Costs lowered without layoffs. We do not grow by gutting people, I continued. We grow by removing stupidity. That earned quiet laughter. I am not here to play queen, I said evenly. I am here to build something that survives ambition, ego, and inheritance. Silence again. Different now. Respectful. The vote followed quickly. Unanimous. Permanent chairwoman. No drama, no celebration. Just signatures and quiet understanding that something old had died and something durable had taken its place. Later that evening, alone in my office, I opened the final envelope Katrina Whitmore had left behind. Inside was a single handwritten note. You broke the cycle. Do not rebuild it. I folded the note and placed it in the drawer I labeled Finished Wars. Bradley never resurfaced in logistics. The rumor mill said venture capital consulting, crypto advisory, things where failure is abstract and accountability optional. Whitmore Corporation dissolved quietly the following quarter. No headlines, just footnotes. The most poetic revenge is invisibility. 6 months later, I stood in a warehouse watching automated routing systems glide freight across the floor like choreography. Marcus ran the dashboards. Sarah audited performance. Greg supervised infrastructure with a grin that said he finally slept. Nothing burned. Nothing screamed. Everything worked. I checked my phone. One notification. Bradley Whitmore viewed your profile. I locked the screen and slipped the phone into my pocket. Some ghosts just want confirmation they were replaced. I turned back to the floor. There was work to do.